The air was filled with soft jazz music and the sound of low conversations. I walked into the bar, my hand on my wife Emily's waist. She was wearing a tight black dress tonight, breathtakingly beautiful, and capturing more than just my gaze. We were here for my best friend Ryan's birthday. This place was one of his regular haunts, with its dim lighting, overpriced cocktails, and unique atmosphere. I saw Ryan at the other end of the room. When he saw us, his loud, hearty laugh cut through the murmurings of the crowd. His expression changed, and he stood up from his seat, flashing a wide smile. But something was a little off. Instead of saying hello to me, he walked past his so-called best friend and gave Emily a big hug, lifting her a few inches off the ground. She giggled and said in surprise, "Emily, wow, you look gorgeous tonight." He said it enthusiastically, then finally turned to me, shook my hand, not really as a greeting but more like an afterthought, his hand loose, almost dismissive, and he didn't even look me in the eye. "Chris," he said, his voice flat as if he were talking to a waiter. I shook his hand back, feeling a twinge of unease. The room seemed to have narrowed, and I looked around, friends, acquaintances, strangers throwing hurried glances my way, their lips twitching with an uncontrollable smile. Someone nearby let out a low chuckle. Was I being paranoid, or were people really laughing? Ryan patted my back exaggeratedly and said, "You'll never forget tonight," he whispered, deliberately lowering his voice, his mouth twitching, his tone no longer the usual playful one, sending a shiver down my spine. Before I could respond, he disappeared into the crowd as if nothing had happened. Emily grabbed my arm. "Don't let him get to you," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with something I couldn't quite identify. "Yes, this is Ryan," I muttered to myself. But the stares didn't go away, and the night continued. The forced smiles and empty toasts were blurred. Emily was radiant, drawing everyone in the room in with her charm. But tonight she was a little sharp. I noticed a sharpness in her that she had never shown before, as she raised her glass to toast Ryan. She spoke, her voice warm but with a teasing edge. When the crowd erupted in laughter, her eyes flickered briefly in my direction, the kind of laughter that felt like it was for me, and caught me off guard. I set down the unconsumed whiskey and watched the amber liquid ripple in the glass before stepping outside and breathing in the fresh night air. I needed space, I needed air, I needed anything to clear my head. The city bustles around me, but I ignore the storm. I light a cigarette and the flame sways gently in the breeze. I think back over everything that has happened tonight. The perfunctory handshakes, the laughter, Ryan's cryptic comments, and Emily, who seems more alive tonight than she has been in weeks, months even. Even I'm ridiculous. Maybe they were just joking. Maybe I'm overreacting. But as I stare at the glowing embers of my cigarette, the feeling of unease grew stronger and stronger. My chest heaved. And as the cigarette burned down, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw Emily's name flashing on the screen. My thumb hesitated, but I finally pressed the green button, put the phone to my ear, and said nothing. "Chris," her voice was soft, calm, even gentle. "You know I love you." There was a pause, and then she added, "Wait for me at home. I'll be there soon." For a moment I wanted to respond, to say something to ease the unease in my heart, but the words stuck in my throat. Without saying anything, I put the phone back in my pocket, my chest tangled up. Is this what love feels like? I felt like a man in the dark, leaning against the bar, watching the cars drive by, their headlights flashing in my face. I didn't leave, I couldn't leave, something kept me there. Some instinct told me that the night was not over yet, that there was still a long way to go. A few minutes later, a friend of Ryan's, someone I'd seen around but never really talked to, walked out of the bar. His steps were uneven, his face flushed with alcohol. He spotted me and paused, giving me a sly knowing look. "Chris, my man," he slurred, swaying slightly as he leaned in closer. "You should be more careful with that wife of yours." My pulse quickened, but I forced my face to remain impassive. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice flat. The guy just chuckled, shaking his head like he knew some secret. "I just said, be careful with her. Women like Emily, they like to be noticed. Anyway, good luck." He patted my shoulder and stumbled off into the night, leaving me standing there, every nerve in my body screaming for me to leave, to go home like Emily had asked. But an inner sense of nagging kept me there. I clenched my fists, pushed against the wall, and made my way back inside. The music was louder now, as people danced and drank. the bass vibrating the floor while a storm raged inside me. I looked around the room, searching for Emily. She wasn't at the bar. She wasn't on the dance floor. I pushed through the crowd, my eyes scanning from face to face, when I heard a faint but clear voice coming from the bar. A low chuckle, followed by a low voice, too close, too intimate. My heart pounding. As I got closer, I pushed past a couple who were hugging tightly, and the laughter started again, this time clearer, and I recognized it immediately. It was Emily. I turned the corner and stopped in my tracks. She is leaning against the bar, flushed, her hair a little disheveled. Ryan is standing next to her, too close, his hand on her hip. No, not just on, his fingers are slipping under her skirt, his palm caressing her bare thigh. The room tilts, my vision narrows, as if I were looking at the world through a tunnel. I can barely hear the music, only the blood roaring in my ears. They haven't even noticed me yet. The two of them are lost in their world. "Emily," I whisper, my voice cold and harsh, cutting through the noise like a knife. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide, shocked and frozen for a moment. She froze, her face pale. Ryan slowly turned around, a sneer on his lips, as if this was all a game to him. "Chris," Emily stammered, stepping away from Ryan and smoothing her skirt with both hands. "It's not what it looks like, but I didn't let her finish." I grabbed the edge of the table next to them and flipped it over, cups and bottles crashing to the floor in a deafening noise that sent the room into silence. All eyes turned to us. The crowd froze in shock and confusion. "You think I'm blind?" I growled, my voice shaking with anger. How could I not notice something that's been in front of my eyes the whole time? "Chris, please." Emily started to reach out to me, but I stepped back, avoiding her touch. Ryan held up his hands, acting innocent. "Hey man, knock it off," I interrupted, pointing a finger at him. "This is not the time for you to talk." Silence spread through the room, suffocating everyone. People exchanged glances, covering their mouths with the backs of their hands and whispering, "I don't care, let them talk, let them see the truth." I looked back at Emily, my voice lower but still sharp. "We're leaving now." She hesitated, her gaze flicking between me and Ryan for a moment, and I thought she would argue, try to stay. But then she nodded, her face full of dismay as she realized the gravity of what had just happened. Without a word, grabbed her wrist and led her through the crowd, their whispers trailing behind us like a dark cloud. When we got outside, the cold night air hit us, but it did nothing to calm the anger in my chest. We got to the car, and I opened the passenger door and motioned for her to get in. She hesitated, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "Chris, I'll keep it," I said almost in a whisper. "Just get in the car." She climbed into the car without saying a word. I closed the door, walked over to the driver's seat, my thoughts in a whirl, my emotions running high, anger, betrayal and heartbreak swirling together in a chaotic maelstrom. The car drove in a suffocating silence, neither of us daring to break the silence. Emily sat in the passenger seat with her hands clenched into fists on her lap, her face streaked with tears, glowing faintly in the streetlight. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white as the scene in the bar played over and over in my mind, every detail becoming clearer and clearer. Her laughter, her hand on her thigh, the smile on his face. I opened my mouth and tried to speak 3 times, but nothing came out. What could I say to make this moment less devastating? I didn't even want to hear what she had to say when she stormed into the driveway. She didn't even wait for the car to come to a complete stop before she dashed out of it. Her high heels made a noise on the pavement as she ran towards the house, her sobs breaking the oppressive silence. I closed the door and followed her inside. My anger was just below the surface, ready to explode. She stormed upstairs and slammed the bedroom door behind her, the sound echoing around the house. It was a shrill summation of the chaotic night. "Open the door, Emily," I shouted, my voice echoing in the silence. "You can't hide. Open the door." There was no response, only the faint sound of her crying on the other side, vague and distant. I slammed my fist against the door, the sound of the impact echoing through the wood. Don't make me break down the door, Emily, I swear, if you don't open it, I still won't open it." I took a step back, breathing heavily, trying to control my anger. My eyes roamed around the hallway and settled on a small purse that she had dropped in her haste to escape. It lay at the foot of the stairs, its contents slightly spilled out, her purse, a compact mirror, and her mobile phone. The screen of the phone was lit up and buzzing, followed by another buzz. I walked over and picked it up. The message glowed like poison in the dark, and I trembled as I unlocked the phone. Our anniversary was still the passcode, a cruel irony. Twisted drove the knife even deeper. There was a long series of messages between Emily and Ryan. I forced myself to read them, but every word pierced my chest like a blade. Ryan, you were incredible. I can't stop thinking about last night. Emily, me too. You always make me feel alive. Ryan, I can't wait to see you again. Let's plan something. Just the two of us. There were photos too intimate. I stared at the picture of her wearing only a thin sheet. My heart sank. In another photo, she was wearing lingerie I had never seen before, and her confident, seductive pose made my stomach churn and my breath catch in my throat. My vision blurred as the weight of it all made me gasp for breath. Not only had she betrayed me, she had created a world of her own, and I wasn't in it. Next I went to the bedroom door again, my phone in my hand, the screen still flashing with photos and text. This time I didn't knock, I didn't plead, I didn't wait angrily. I threw open the door with my shoulder, and it made a sharp cracking sound as it swung inward, revealing Emily curled up on the bed, her face buried in her hands. She looked up, aghast, tears streaming down her face pale and blotchy. Chris? What's wrong? I threw my phone on the bed, screen facing up. Emily, what is this? I shouted, my voice a mixture of anger and heartbreak. What the hell is going on? Her eyes were glued to the phone, her eyes widening as she saw the messages and pictures. She tried to grab it, but I took it away and put it out of her reach. Don't even think about it, I growled, my voice shaking. You lied to me my whole life. She started crying even harder, her shoulders shaking, and once again buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she choked out, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, I said with a bitter laugh, which was hardly enough to make up for it. Emily, how could you have fooled around with my best friend for so long under my nose? You looked me in the eye every day and pretended that everything was fine. She didn't answer, just sobbed with her hands over her face, her body racked with guilt, perhaps just from the weight of being caught. I paced the room, my hands shaking, trying to sort my thoughts, my emotions tangled and incomprehensible. Do you realize what you've done? I demanded my voice. You have not only betrayed me but also humiliated me in front of everyone. How long has this been going on, Emily? Her words are broken. No, that's not what I meant. Don't give me that. I'm angry. You can't get away with it. I want the truth, Emily, all of it. Right now she looks up at me, her eyes full of tears, pleading with me. I never meant to hurt you, she whispers. I didn't know how to stop her. Words that were weak and meaningless, only fanning the flames of my anger. You don't know how to stop it? Are you kidding me? You had plenty of opportunities to stop it. Every lie, every text message, every night you spent with him. It was a choice, Emily, a deliberate choice. I turned around and stormed out of the room, the phone still in my hand. I couldn't bear to look at her. At least not yet, not after what I had just witnessed. The home we had built together felt like it was closing in on me, choking me. I stormed out of the bedroom, my mind racing with anger, betrayal, and a painful determination. The phone was still in my hand, and with every step it felt heavier and heavier. This was not just her betrayal, it was also my humiliation, my destroyed trust, and my ruined life. I walked to the kitchen table, dropped the phone, and, with every nerve in my body on edge, screamed inside for the chance to strike back at her again. But I forced myself to remain calm. Emily had been very methodical in her cheating, carefully covering her tracks when it suited her. Now I had to be just as methodical, to make sure she slipped away, leaving a trail of damage in her wake. I unlocked her phone and began forwarding every message, every photo, and every detail to my device. Each attachment like a dagger, stabbing deep into my chest, but I didn't stop. Ryan's smug texts, her flirtatious replies, the explicit photos she'd sent him painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Her phone rang again, another message from Ryan. Ryan hoped he wouldn't. The scene couldn't wait to see you tomorrow. Such bold behavior makes me furious. He's not just an accomplice, he's a participant. He knows full well the damage they're causing. My finger hovered over the screen, tempted to reply and send some harsh words, but I resisted. This wasn't about him, not yet. About him, but about Emily and the choices she's made. When I've sent everything to myself, I put the phone down, my hands shaking, and turned towards the stairs. The bedroom door is broken, hanging on by a jar, and her low sobs are so faint they're almost drowned out by the sound of my heart beating. I take deliberate steps back, push the door open, and she's sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. "Emily," I say, my voice cold and firm. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "You have 5 minutes," her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer immediately, but picked up her purse from where it had fallen earlier and threw it on the floor at her feet, spilling its contents. Lipstick, receipts, wallet. "But I don't care," I said firmly, pointing to the door. "You have 5 minutes to pack and leave this house." She stared at me, her tear-filled eyes full of disbelief. "Chris, please, you can't mean it. We can work this out." I meant every word. I cut across my voice. "I spent the last hour proving how unimportant I am. You can't stay here, especially after what you've done." She got up from the bed with trembling lips, slow and hesitant movements. "Where am I supposed to go?" "It's not my problem," she whispers. I interrupt her and call Ryan. "I'm sure he'll be happy to come and get you." Her body trembles at the sound of his name, and she begins to pack her things with shaking hands. I watch her, my hands crossed, my whole body a mixture of anger and heartbreak. She shoves things into her bag with shaking hands, crying louder and louder. You don't have to do this." Her voice was choking. "We can talk about this, we can work it out." "Work it out?" I laughed bitterly. "You don't know how long it took to sneak around with my best friend, to lie to my face and humiliate me, and now you think this is something we can work out?" She paused, her hands hovering over an earring that had fallen on the bed. "Chris, that's enough," I snapped, my patience exhausted. I walked over to the wardrobe, flung open the door, grabbed a handful of her clothes and walked over to the nearest window, opened it, and threw them out. The clothes landed on the lawn with a dull thud, the fabric billowing in the wind. "Chris!" she cried, running towards me. "Stop it!" I shouted, turning around, furious at her unreasonable and petulant behavior. "You can't tell me how I should feel, Emily, not anymore." Pushing her away, I grabbed her shoes, her makeup bag, and anything else I could find, and threw them out of the window, each item a part of the betrayal I was banishing from my life. "Stop it," she screamed, trying to grab my arm, but I shook her off. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said coldly, taking a step back to let her finish. "Take what you can and go." Tears streamed down her face as she hurriedly gathered up the remaining items and frantically stuffed them into her bag. "Chris, I love you," she said in desperation. "I didn't want this to happen, did I?" I raised my hand to silence her. "You can't say that now, not after what's happened." Minutes felt like an eternity. She gathered her things, her sobs echoing through the empty house. Finally, she walked towards the door, her shoulders slumped, her head bowed. I felt an empty ache in my chest. I wanted to shout and scream, but I did nothing, just stood there, heartbroken. I didn't move when she walked out the door. I closed the door behind me, and the sound echoed in the quiet hallway. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Anger still burned in my heart, but it was now mixed with deep sadness. She was gone, but the heavy feeling of betrayal still lingered. The house was eerily quiet. The echo of her sobs had faded, leaving only the oppressive silence, which seemed to press against the walls. I walked downstairs, my footsteps heavy, my chest rising and falling with the emotions of what had just happened. My hands were still shaking, and the adrenaline coursing through my body prevented me from calming down. In the kitchen, I grabbed the biggest glass I could find and filled it with red wine. The dark red liquid swirled in my hands as I stared at it, hoping it would provide the answers I so desperately needed. But it didn't. I growled in frustration and slammed the glass against the far wall. It shattered on impact, sending shards flying in all directions, and the wine splattered like blood on the white paint. The sound echoed through the empty house, sharp and harsh, but it didn't make me feel any better. I collapsed onto the sofa, covering my face with my hands, trembling, not from tears, but from a mixture of anger and despair. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, flashing past in a cruel montage of good times. Her smile at the wedding, the way she laughed at my bad jokes, the way she laughed and covered her stomach when tears ran down her cheeks. The peaceful mornings, holidays, anniversaries, nights when we stayed up just so the day wouldn't end. Now it all seems like a lie, a performance. Every smile, every kiss, every I love you. My chest, as the questions pile up, become more and more painful. I look around the living room, my eyes falling on the traces of our life together. A photo from our honeymoon, her face beaming with happiness as she sits on the mantelpiece, and us standing hand in hand on a sunny beach. The memories feel strange now, like they belong to someone else. I pick up my phone and with trembling fingers, flick through the contacts. Megan Emily, best friend Megan, has been part of our lives for years. I've always considered her someone I can trust. She might be able to give me some answers. I press the call button and hold the phone to my ear. The phone rings. My heart pounds, and with each beat my heart rises higher. She answers the phone after the third ring. Chris. Megan's voice is soft and cautious. "Hey, is everything okay?" I said nothing. My throat felt as if it were closing up, my words tangled up in a knot of anger and hesitation. "Chris," he said again, his tone more worried. "Are you there?" I cleared my throat, forcing myself to speak. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice. "We need to meet, just you and me." There was a pause at the other end of the line. "What's going on? Do you know what's going on?" I said, my words cut off. "Tomorrow at noon, the restaurant on 5th Avenue. This time the pause was longer. "Okay," she said, "finally I'll be there." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, threw it on the sofa next to me, leaned my head back on the cushion and stared at the ceiling. The weight of everything was on me, like a blanket of lead. Tomorrow I will get an answer, and I will piece together the fragments of my shattered life. But tonight, I have nothing but silence and the broken glass of the spilled wine glass, which cruelly reminds me of how fragile everything has become. Restless and in pain, I toss and turn, my mind replaying the events of the night in a cruel loop, every detail vivid and clear. The messages, the photos, Emily's desperate pleas. As I throw her things out the window, my mind fills with a million unanswered questions, my anger and heartbreak tangled into a knot that makes me feel like I can't breathe. I haven't slept for more than 2 hours. If the morning light shines through the curtains at that moment, I give up trying. I sit up, rubbed my face, stared at the empty wine bottle on the coffee table, the jagged pile of broken glass from last night still leaning against the wall, but I had no strength to clean them up, at least not yet. I picked up the keys and walked to the car. As I pulled out of the driveway, the engine roared to life. Despite the cool morning air, the air inside the car was still suffocating. As I drove down the empty street to Megan's house, my thoughts were racing. I can hardly breathe. Friendships, I bitterly think, are supposed to be the cornerstone of your life, aren't they? Yesterday, Ryan was still my best friend, the one person I could share everything with, the one person I could laugh with over a beer, the one person I could remember the milestones of my life with, the one person who was at my wedding, and now he has taken everything I hold dear and torn it to shreds. My hands grip the steering wheel. How can someone become an enemy overnight? How can someone look you in the eye and laugh with you and still betray you like this? When I arrived at Megan's house, my mind was full of unanswered questions. The house was small, a quiet retreat in the suburbs. I parked in the driveway, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. Megan opened the door without even waiting for me to knock. Her expression was a mixture of concern and reluctance. "Chris," she said softly, and stepped aside to let me in. I haven't slept well either. We sat down at the kitchen table, a pot of UN brand coffee steaming. Megan looked at me, and there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't read, maybe sympathy, maybe guilt. I needed answers. I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I know you're Emily's friend, and I'm not asking you to betray her, but I need to know the truth. Megan, how long has this been going on?" She looked down at her hands, nervously rubbing them together on her lap. "Chris, I don't know all the details. Emily didn't tell me much. Don't lie to me." My tone interrupted sharper. "You're her best friend, she trusts you, don't sit there and tell me you know nothing." She sighed. Her shoulders slumped as if unable to bear the weight of the conversation. "It's been a while," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "How long?" 2 months, 3 months of depression." Megan hesitated, her eyes darting to the table as if looking for an escape. "At least 2 months, she finally said, and that's when she started acting differently. She mentioned Ryan more often. She seemed happier, but not in a meaningful way. 3 months. Megan hesitates, her eyes flicking to the table as if looking for an excuse to escape. "At least 2 months. She finally tells the truth. From then on, her behavior starts to become unusual. She starts to mention Ryan frequently, and seems happier. But the way she is happy is meaningless. I don't want to pry. I grit my teeth as the confirmed truth hits me like a punch in the stomach. 2 months, I mutter to myself, leaning back in my chair. She's been lying to me for at least 2 months. Chris, why didn't she tell me? I cut her off, rising. Why didn't she come and tell me she wasn't happy? She wanted something different. Why did she have to be so sneaky? Megan winces at the tone of my voice. Her hands ball into fists. I don't know, she says. I swear I don't know. I think she's afraid of me suddenly interrupting her, afraid of having an honest conversation, afraid of facing the consequences of her choices. It's losing you, Megan says softly, and her words stop me in my tracks. I think she's afraid of losing you. As confusing as it sounds, she thinks she can have both you and Ryan, and whatever else she thinks she needs. The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I shook my head and gave a bitter smile. That's the problem, isn't it? She wants everything without paying the price. She wants to be loved, trusted, and admired. But she's not willing to be honest. Megan didn't respond, and her silence and admission left me feeling there was nothing to argue about. I stared at the table, my mind racing through the texts and photos, and I discovered 2 months of lies and betrayal, making me feel like the one who had failed. Did Ryan know? I finally asked the question. Did he know how much damage he had caused, or was this just some kind of game to him? I didn't know. Megan's voice was full of anger as she said, I'm not talking to Ryan. I don't even like him. I watch her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Her expression is serious, her concern genuine. Maybe she's not part of this mess, at least not as much as I fear, but that doesn't take the weight off my chest. I need to figure out what to do next. I stand up and say, but thank you for your honesty. She nodded, sadness in her eyes. Chris, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it was. I didn't respond, just walked to the door, my mind still reeling with everything I'd learned. The journey home was quiet, but the storm inside was far from over. For 2 months I'd held the steering wheel tight, and for 2 months lies had filled my veins. When I left Megan's house, the answer she'd given me wasn't enough, and it would never calm the edge of betrayal. I needed more. I needed to know the extent of the rot, how far Ryan would go to destroy everything. I thought we had an understanding. As I gripped the steering wheel, a plan formed in my mind. Ryan, he was the next puzzle piece. Confronting him directly would be satisfying, but too impulsive. I had learned the value of patiently gathering evidence. If there was more to uncover, I would find when I approached Ryan's house. The driveway was empty, the curtains drawn, no sign of movement. Discouraged, I decided to park a block away and wait. It wasn't long before his sleek black car pulled out of the driveway 10 minutes later, the engine a low rumble. As it drove down the quiet suburban street, I started my car and followed at a safe distance. My pulse quickened as I realized I had no idea what I would find or how far I was willing to go. Ryan drove with a carefree air, as if he didn't care about anything in the world. The morning sun bounced off his rear window as I followed him around a few bends, keeping a careful low profile until he eventually pulled into a small car park in front of a florist's. A florist's. I gripped the steering wheel as I watched him step out of the car, his door relaxed, his movements unhurried. He wore a crisp shirt and his hair was neatly combed back, giving him a sense of total innocence. My stomach churned with disgust as I watched him walk into the shop. A few minutes later he came out holding a bouquet of roses, the bright red petals contrasting with the monotone gray of the car park. Without stopping, he climbed back into the car, placed the flowers on the passenger seat and drove off. I followed the destination. To my surprise, it was an upmarket restaurant, the kind of place you need to book weeks in advance. Ryan handed the valet the car keys and disappeared into the restaurant, still holding the flowers. I parked across the street, my heart pounding, not knowing what to do next, when I saw her. A woman walked out of the restaurant, her high heels making a crisp sound on the pavement. She approached Ryan, tall and elegant, her hair casually falling around her face. Her clothes showed off her slender figure and oozed with mature charm, but she was not Emily, and she was not Ryan's wife. My heart sank. Ryan handed her flowers with glee, his smile confident and his posture relaxed. The woman beamed, her face glowing as she accepted the bouquet. They exchanged a few words, then walked together into the restaurant. Her arm touched his arm casually. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Ryan, my best friend, the man who betrayed me and my wife, Not only ruined my life, but also led a double life. I was glad I had brought my camera and captured every detail from a vantage point. Ryan handed her a bouquet of flowers, they smiled, and walked into the restaurant together, relaxed and carefree, as if they had no worries in the world. I stared at them, transfixed, through the large windows of the restaurant, watching them laugh and chat. Questions raced through my mind. Who is she? How long have they been together? Does Ryan's wife know? And most importantly, what would Emily think if she knew the man she had left was cheating on her too? Satisfied with the evidence I had gathered, I switched off the camera and leaned back in my chair. I realized the irony that Ryan, who had betrayed me, was living such a blatant lie, which made my own situation seem like a bad joke. It was no longer just about Emily, but about exposing Ryan for what he really was. It wasn't just about me, but about everyone in his life. As I drove home from the restaurant, my thoughts were sharp and well considered. Ryan, the man who pretended to be my closest friend, had not only destroyed my marriage, but also led his own secret life. I wasted no time. On the way home, I pulled over in a quiet spot, opened my laptop and uploaded the photos and videos I had taken at the restaurant. Every photo, every frame, was damning evidence. Ryan's betrayal was not only personal, it was universal. I wrote a short email to his wife, attaching the files, and titled it "Things You Should Know." I never wanted to be the one to send it, but I thought you needed to see the truth. Ryan has been cheating on you. These photos and videos speak louder than I ever could. I'm sorry I hit send. I stare at the screen. The gravity of my actions leaves me in a daze. This isn't just revenge, it's justice. People like Ryan can't manipulate other people's lives without consequences. Once I get back home, an empty house greets me. It was once an empty shell. I pick up my phone and call my divorce lawyer. A colleague recommended a contact, someone who had been through something similar. We make an appointment for the following afternoon. This is the first step in taking back my life. The sound of the doorbell wakes me from my thoughts. I frown and wonder who it could be. When I open the door, I freeze. It's Emily. She was standing on the porch, pale, with red eyes from crying, her face swollen with sobs. "Chris," she began, her voice shaking, "please, I need to talk to you." Without hesitation, I slammed the door in her face. My heart was pounding in the silence of the house, but my resolve was firm. She wasn't worth any more of my time. The doorbell rang again, followed by a knock on the door. "Chris, please," she called through the door, "let me just get my things and I won't bother you again." I opened the door and met her pleading eyes. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly, "and then you can leave with what you need." She nodded and cautiously entered the house, her movements hesitant. She didn't say a word as she went upstairs to pack her bags. I stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching the minutes tick by on the clock. When she finally returned, holding her suitcase and bag, she stood on the doorstep, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, Chris. I know I hurt you, but I'm saved." I interrupted her, pulled out my phone, flicked open the screen and held it up for her to see. It showed the photo I'd taken of Ryan in the restaurant. "Take a closer look." She frowned and leaned in closer. "What is it? Your lover?" I said, my voice cold. "It's Ryan, giving flowers to another woman and taking her to an expensive dinner." I followed him. I saw everything. Her face twisted. First confusion, then disbelief. "No way," she says, shaking her head. "Ryan would never do that." "He would," I interrupted. "He told me. I watched them. I recorded it. While you were abandoning our marriage for him, he was busy cheating on you." Again, tears welled up in her eyes. She stared at the photo, her hands trembling. "No," she whispered to herself. "Not to me. This isn't true, Chris, please. You have to believe me." "I don't know, don't play games," I said, my voice firm and sharp. "You made your choice, Emily. You chose to betray me, you chose to lie. And now you have to live with the consequences." She let go of the suitcase and grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate. "Chris, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it up to you. Please give me another chance." I pulled back my arm and took a step back. "Get a lawyer, Emily," I said, my tone resolute. "You need to get a lawyer." She sobbed and I slammed the door in her face. I leaned against it, my chest heaving, trying to hold back the urge to explode with anger and grief. The house fell silent again, but this time the silence felt like the beginning, not the end. I had taken the first step towards taking back my life. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was my road, and for now that was enough. The day after the confrontation with Emily, I feel a disturbing calm. The house is quiet, and the silence envelops the air like a fog. It is not the silence of peace, but the absence of what I had thought was a complete life. There are no footsteps upstairs, no idle chatter, no laughter. Emily is gone, and with her the illusion of our marriage. I sat down at the kitchen table, and in front of me was the evidence I had collected. Screenshots of text messages, photos of Emily and Ryan together, and recordings from the dining room. All the evidence was neatly filed away in a folder, and each piece of evidence reminded me of the betrayal, but also gave me strength. This was not a simple breakup, but a fight to regain my dignity. I picked up my phone and called my divorce lawyer. I told him I was ready, and we made an appointment. In the afternoon, when the time came, I drove to his office, thinking about what was about to happen. The lawyer was a sharp, professional man named Mark. He shook my hand and led me into a small, well-equipped conference room. Mark began flipping through a notebook, asking me to start from the beginning and tell him everything I needed to know. I told the whole story, starting with the strange behavior I had noticed in Emily, to the discovery of her affair with Ryan, and finally the evidence I had gathered. Mark listened attentively, taking notes from time to time. When I had finished, his expression was difficult to read. I pushed the folder across the table. This was everything I had said: text messages, photos, videos, proof of the affair, proof of Ryan's infidelity with another woman. I didn't want to leave anything to chance in court. Mark opened the folder and began to go through the contents. As he leafed through, he nodded in approval. He said the evidence was conclusive. The evidence was conclusive, and the record was detailed, which would undoubtedly enhance your chances of winning. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. I never imagined that what I was holding in my hands would be what happened next. Mark put the folder down and crossed his arms on the table. First, we will file preliminary papers to begin the divorce process. Given the nature of the evidence, we will file for a fault divorce on the grounds of adultery. It is important to establish her infidelity, as this may affect the division of assets, spousal maintenance, and even the future of any children, if you have plans for that. I nod, thinking about the implications of this. What about Ryan? Will this have legal implications for him? Mark shakes his head, not answering directly. He wasn't married to you, so the focus of the court will be on your marriage and your spouse's actions. However, if he is called to testify, the fact that he was involved in multiple betrayals could damage his credibility. Okay, I say, my voice cold. He should feel the gravity of his actions. Mark nods but keeps a professional tone. Let's focus on you. The process can be emotionally draining, but it's important to remain calm and collected. The evidence will speak for itself. If Emily doesn't agree to a divorce, we'll handle it strategically. Otherwise, we'll push for a quick settlement. Over the next hour, we discuss the legal process, the timeline, and the possible outcomes. Mark explains everything clearly, and his confidence is reassuring. At the end of the meeting, I feel a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The road ahead is difficult, but at least I'm in control of my life again. The burden on my shoulders seems to have lightened a little as I leave the office. Filing for divorce not only meant ending the marriage, it also meant reclaiming my self-respect, dignity, and future. I had the evidence, the plan, and now the determination. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but I would rebuild it my way. After the surreal meeting with Mark Felt, things started to move. The divorce papers were filed and there was no turning back. I had taken the first step to reclaiming my life, but the fallout from the betrayal would not go away easily. I tried to focus on work, to get absorbed in it, and keep my mind busy. But every now and then Emily's face would appear, her tears, her desperate apology when I showed her the photos. It wasn't regret that bothered me, it was the sense of emptiness, of realizing how much time and trust I had wasted on someone who didn't value it. The house felt different too, quieter and colder, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension and the heartbreak. Her things were gone, vanished along with the subtle traces she had left behind. The lingering scent of perfume on her clothes, her favorite book on the coffee table, the mug she used for her morning coffee, all of it, just empty memories. But the silence didn't last long. The third day after filing, I got a call from Mark Chris. He said in a cautious tone that Emily's lawyer had contacted me and that she had no objection to a divorce. I felt a wave of relief, but the cautious tone calmed me down again. What did it mean? It meant she was willing to cooperate. Mark explained that she probably realized that the evidence you had made the case a losing one for her, and that she would finalize the terms of the division of assets, maintenance payments, and other financial arrangements. If she signed the agreement without a fuss, then everything could be resolved quickly. Great. I said firmly that I wanted to settle the matter as soon as possible. Mark agreed and we ended the call. I sat there digesting the news, realizing that while the legal proceedings might be simple, the emotional implications were far more complicated. Emily's cooperation could not erase the betrayal, nor make up for it. That night, as I sat on the sofa drinking wine, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unfamiliar number. Emily Chris. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to apologize again for everything I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to tell you how sorry I am for what I did. I stared at the message, my jaw clenched. The words were hollow and insubstantial. Too little and too late. What did she expect to achieve? A pardon that would make her feel better about what she had done. Instead of replying, I deleted the message, put the phone down, and refused to give her any more space. The next morning I received an email from Mark with a preliminary divorce agreement attached, along with a note saying that Emily had agreed to the proposed terms. I read the document carefully, each clause reinforcing the finality of the situation. Once I signed, our marriage would officially be over. I hesitated, the tip of the pen hovering over the paper, not because I doubted my decision, but because at that moment everything would become real. Signing would mean ending a chapter that I had once thought would last forever. It means admitting that the life we built together has been irreparably broken, but it also means freedom. Freedom from the lies, the betrayals, the crushing weight of a relationship that is no longer viable. I signed the papers later that day and drove to Mark's office to hand them in. He greeted me at the reception desk. He took the folder without losing his professional composure. "This is an important step," he said. He gave me a relieved smile and said, "You're almost there, thank you." I shook his hand. On the way home I felt a strange sense of clarity. The pain of the betrayal was still present, and the road ahead was not without its challenges. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was moving forward, rather than wallowing in the mire of my broken heart. That night, I sat on the porch, sipping whiskey and watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was tinged with orange and pink, a reminder that even the fiercest storm eventually subsides. I was not yet fully recovered, but I had taken the first step, and that was enough. The decision to start over was not easy. The house I shared with Emily was not just a building, it was a treasure trove of good and bad memories. Every corner echoed with the remnants of the life we had created together, now betrayed and reduced to rubble. I realized that staying there would bind me to the past and prevent me from moving forward. One evening, I stood in the living room, all the pictures and decorations on the walls peeling away, and a heavy silence filled the air. It no longer felt like home, but like an empty shell. That was when I knew it was time to go. The process of selling the house was very quick. I contacted a real estate agent, explained my situation in general terms, and then put the house on the market. Given the location and condition of the house, it quickly attracted buyers. A few weeks later, I signed the documents and the house was finally sold. I turned my attention to finding a new home. This time I wanted a completely different place, a space that represented a new beginning. I browsed the listings, visited countless apartments, and finally settled on a stylish, modern studio in the city center. Everything here was so different from my old life, bright and full of potential. On moving day, I felt a mixture of emotions. Packing up the remnants of my old life was like rummaging through the ashes of a burnt-down building. I got rid of most of it, including clothes, furniture, and even books, because they reminded me of Emily. What I kept was minimal, neatly packed into a few boxes, ready to be unpacked in my new apartment, which was all mine. The first night felt strange and calm at the same time. The floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the city, the lights twinkling like stars. The traffic noise and the hum of life were comforting, reminding me that I was part of something bigger. I opened a bottle of wine and sat on the sofa, letting the reality of my new life wash over me over the next few days. I focused on making the apartment my home. I chose things that suited my own taste, not someone else's. I hung the art that moved me, filled the shelves with books I'd always wanted to read, and bought plants to bring the space to life. It wasn't just a home, it was a statement of independence. I also started exploring the city, living in the center, where there were new opportunities at every turn, from cafes and art galleries to parks and restaurants. The energy of the urban environment made it possible to forget the weight of the past. But moving forward was not just about the physical space, it was also about letting go of the past. I deliberately stopped thinking about the things that had brought me to this point. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. They were still there, but they no longer controlled me. Every day was an opportunity to create something new, and I was determined to make the most of it. One evening, I was strolling through the city streets, when the cool air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. I hoped that this wasn't just the fantasy of an innocent person about a perfect life, but also the silent support of someone who chose to embrace life despite its imperfections. Starting over was difficult but also liberating. The apartment, the city, and the life I created were all mine, without a trace of the past. For the first time in months, I felt like I was really moving forward step by step, and that was enough.